Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads. No distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. Eduflix.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Good evening and welcome to the Late Show on Teacher Talk Radio. I'm your host, Huma Mirza, and I'm very excited about tonight's show. If you work in education, especially in leadership, you'll know that all too often middle leaders just seem to fall into senior roles. Not necessarily because they're ready, but because there is a gap that needs filling. And suddenly, someone who was leading a subject or a phase is now managing people, navigating strategy, and carrying whole school responsibility, often without much support. So tonight we're asking a big question. Are we just filling roles, or are we truly building leaders? And what would it take to do the latter properly? I am thrilled to be joined tonight by two brilliant guests. First, we have Dr. George Scorgie, a returning guest on the show and someone with a wealth of leadership experience. George has worked in the international schools across Asia, Africa, and Middle East. He is passionate about building school cultures and creating leadership pathways that are meaningful and sustainable. Welcome, George.
Thanks, Huma, and thanks for having me back after the last technology glitch. If I ever come back again, I promise it will be better. My technology skills will be much improved.
That is fantastic. We're so glad to have you back. And alongside George, we have Andrew Cole, who is currently based at Trident College in Zambia. Andrew's leadership journey spans multiple continents and contexts, and his work focuses on empowering staff, coaching teams, and creating systems that support middle leaders to thrive. Welcome to the show, Andrew.
Thank you, Huma. It's very nice of you to invite me, and I'm looking forward to tonight's chat. So thank you.
So glad to have you both. So let's get straight into it. We're going to talk about, understanding the issue. George, I'm going to start with you. What does it really mean to fall up into leadership? Why do you think this happens so frequently in schools?
I think if you've been in schools long enough, you would have experienced a phenomena where you see someone and you kind of question how they got that role. So falling up, it looks like someone that's not prepared for the role is in a role. How does it happen? Someone might have been at the school for a very long time. They become the default choice, or there's someone that's kind of waited for a role, perhaps 10 years plus, or perhaps no one else wants that job. So they become the leader by default. Perhaps they're an excellent teacher, and the thought is that perhaps an excellent teacher will make an excellent leader. And they fall into roles that they're possibly will have the skills for, but perhaps aren't ready for them at the moment. I think it happens in many places because schools or leadership teams, they mistake institutional knowledge for institutional experience. Because someone's been in a school or an organization for a long time, it doesn't give them knowledge on how a school can best be run or best operate, or more importantly, improve in the best ways.
Yes, quite right. And Andrew, what is your take on this? What are the risks when leaders are promoted before they are properly prepared?
Well, I think we always talk in teaching about how we would never want to set someone up for failure, and essentially that's what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're quite right when you pick up on the idea that just because someone is an outstanding practitioner in a classroom doesn't automatically mean that they're ready to go and lead teams of people. I know teachers are by default leaders. We lead our children every day, but leading adults and leading them towards a school vision and a collective ethos and identity is a slightly different animal. And the dangers are significant. I said when we were talking earlier, I said, the reality is a school can get by better with weak senior leadership and strong middle leadership than it can with weak middle leadership and strong senior leadership, because you're not operationalizing anything that you set out to achieve. And in that context, then you have a stagnation in the school, you have conflict and cliques evolving and developing. The shared sense of progress and identity suffers, and you erode the team trust. In certain instances, particularly in the international school setting with which both George and I are so familiar, that leads to much higher turnover of staff, poor retention. It reinforces poor or negative practices, and unfortunately, schools rise slowly, but can fall very, very quickly if you get that wrong. So oftentimes it's not, the selection process for leadership doesn't stop with the job offer. That's really where the process starts, and it's the job of the senior team to make sure that anyone they're putting into leadership positions is properly supported so that they can be effective.
So you both have been in, senior leadership roles for a while. How would you distinguish between someone who's, a strong teacher and someone who's ready to lead others?
I think when you look at how leadership is structured, if you say that a senior leadership team and perhaps other like associated senior leaders are they manage output, so they manage things like budgets, they manage things like overall student achievement. So they're responsible for the numbers on the page that go into reports. And if you look at what happens in a classroom, the teachers manage inputs. They're the ones that actualize the school vision. And in the middle of those two things, you've got a layer of people who are responsible both for inputs, what happens in every individual classroom, but they're also answerable for outputs. So if you were to prepare somebody for all that, like what does preparation look like? It looks like the school purposely skills people up to manage inputs and manage outputs at the same time. Middle leadership is the hardest job in the school. If the head of the school isn't there for a week, the school won't fall apart. But if you have your key middle leaders absent for a week, schools they lag behind and things don't get done and key things don't happen within the school. So what does it look like? It looks like giving people the skills to manage the outputs, the budgets, the conflict resolution. And I think easy way to summarize it is that many people shy away from what they consider tough conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that there's no such thing as a tough conversation. It's just an unprepared leader. It doesn't mean to say that every conversation you'll have is going to be a pleasant one, or every situation you have to deal with won't have, potentially emotional aspects to it. But dealing with those in an effective manner essentially means that those unpleasant things can be handled in a way that maintains the dignity of the people involved, but actually works towards the output of the greater school goals. So any framework that prepares people for that is something that schools should look to build into the selection processes for middle leaders or even for senior leaders.
I would also I would just add to that to say, in terms of identifying potential,
Mm-hmm.
um, you're not looking at people expecting them to be the finished article. You're looking for that potential. And
Yeah.
so, I always say to people, do the job you want to have, not just the one you've got, because when the school leaders then turn around and realize, actually, you know what, we really need someone for that role. You've carved out the position for yourself already, and you're the logical choice. And when you see people in maybe in informal roles of leadership, where they're taking on a passion project, or they're the first to put their hand up to lead, some sort of initiative within the school, you can start to identify that leadership qualities as a separate element from maybe their excellent classroom practice. Because yes, leadership can be taught, and it's a lifelong process, and you have to learn it and study it and practice it. But there's also an element of that kind of core drive within someone that you can identify and then you can nurture.
Yeah, you're absolutely right there, Andy. And now that you've mentioned study it, I would like to bring this back to a personal experience, because this topic really, really, hits home for me. Um, I myself, at the moment, I'm a middle leader. I have worked in education over 18 years. And my journey started out as a paraprofessional, where I was supporting children in classrooms, and I went ahead and trained to become a teacher. And over time, I worked my way up, and now I'm a middle leader in a school leading English and reading. And along the way, I've completed my NPQLL, and I'm currently doing my NPQSL. And while I've gained all that theoretical knowledge, and it has been incredibly valuable, I, I still feel that there is something missing. And I feel that, you can study leadership all you want, but until you're actually in the role, facing those daily challenges, supporting a team, managing conflict and making those strategic decisions, it's very hard to truly develop the confidence and instincts of a senior leader. So, what do you have to say about that? Do you think, it's appropriate for middle leaders to step into the leadership role and learn along the way? How does that work, in your opinion?
Andy, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think those are very, very valid points. I did the NPQSL as
Mm,
well, and one of the and with my subsequent leadership masters, the reality is, with the academic learning, it is absolutely invaluable. And particularly for me, the most valuable thing was the actually creating the final dissertation and the research that comes out of that, because you can go
yeah,
down the rabbit holes that are appropriate to you, and that are that catch your interest, and that's fantastic. But even when you're running a project within a school in a context such as the NPQs, you're
mm,
not doing it from the position of formal leadership. So you're relying on kind of goodwill, and it's a training exercise. The simple reality is, until you're in the role and until you make the mistakes, um, the learning is hard won, and sometimes you're not going to get every decision right, not by any manner or means. As long as you're reflective, then obviously that can be a learning experience for you. But it is a challenge, and I'm a great believer that this idea that exists in some schools, particularly when we're talking about international hires. Oh, well, they haven't been a middle leader before, so why would we hire them as a middle leader for us? Well, how's someone supposed to get middle leadership experience unless someone takes a chance on them? And so taking a chance on someone who's perhaps unproven in terms of the previous roles is fine, but you have to put that support in place. And a lot of the time that can be just a mentor relationship. It can be just those hundreds of short conversations that you might have over the course of a term or an academic year or whatever else it is,
yeah,
and letting someone know that if you're there as their line manager, as a senior leader, your door is always open, and there is
Mm.
absolutely no shame in asking. No one knows everything. I make mistakes every single day, I'm sure. um, but you have to learn from them, and then you have to cultivate people within that. So I'm happy for people to go into leadership positions if they're unproven, but it then falls on me as the senior leader. If they do fall down, then what did I not provide for them in terms of the support, the guidance, the mentoring, the suggestions, the anecdotal previous experiences to try and upskill them?
Absolutely. If you don't really have a theoretical understanding, or you haven't read widely on leadership, making a plan and running a school, it comes down to a lot of strategy. And so, and it can be things like hiring, problem solving, how to use money effectively. These have to be part of a bigger vision, and like reading and understanding and qualifications like the MPQSL, all of those things gear you to be part of a strategic team, because that's essentially what you're doing. You're trying to steer this sometimes very large ship with a whole bunch of people, and all of those people have a different interest. They're at a different stage of their career. Every student's at a different stage of their educational experience and has a different need. So without a formal set of training and without the mentoring to take that training and put it into practice, it's very difficult to develop as a leader in any context.
I absolutely agree with both of you because I have that experience this year, stepping into middle leadership. I had completed my MPQLL, but then my head teacher supported me throughout the year so that I could develop and gain the confidence of becoming an exceptionally good literacy lead. So giving people the qualifications and expecting them to lead also ties in with support from SLT in supporting them in doing the the role properly and meeting the requirements of senior leadership. So yes, I absolutely agree with both of you. I think we need to pause here for a quick break. We shall be back in a moment.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads. No distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. Eduflix.com.
Hi secondary school teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculums. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
Did you know that every year, half of disadvantaged children who are top attainers at primary school don't go on to achieve top GCSE maths results? At Axiom Maths, we exist to change that. Our fully funded programme helps schools nurture young mathematicians through weekly face-to-face maths circles, where pupils tackle challenging and exciting problems outside the national curriculum. With just under £3,000 annual funding, expert training and quality resources, we give schools everything they need to inspire the next generation of mathematical thinkers. Want to make a difference? Visit axiommaths.com today and join over 400 schools delivering math circles across the UK.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
So-called stuck schools will be held accountable even if support brokered for them by the government RISE teams fails to turn them around, according to a report in Schools Week. Speaking at the Schools and Academies Show, Department for Education Director General John Edwards said, "The current responsible body, the Schools Trust or Council, is accountable for the improvement. It owns the improvement journey." He went on to say that this starting principle had been really important for Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson. Earlier this month, 45 new advisors were appointed to join the 20 already appointed in RISE teams. The expanded team will start working with more than 200 schools deemed stuck for receiving a requires improvement Ofsted grade following an earlier below good judgment. When the government initially unveiled plans for the RISE teams, there was confusion around accountability. But slides shown during the presentation by Mr. Edwards indicate that once a school becomes eligible for support, the RISE teams will assess its capacity to improve. Where a school needs help, it will be matched with a high-quality organisation and considered for funded intervention. An improvement plan would then be co-constructed. Edwards went on to say, the RISE advisor's job is not to deliver the improvement. The BBC Education section of their news website reports that private school fees were 22.6% higher on average in January this year when compared with a year earlier. This is according to the body that represents most independent schools in the UK, the Independent Schools Council. It says it expects a reduction in pupils applying to private schools as a result of changes to VAT, but it says it is too soon to know the full effects of the policy. The average termly fee for a day school in January was £7,382, which includes 20% VAT. In January 2024, the average was £6,021. A Treasury spokesperson says the increase in fees are not only down to VAT, and that fees have been rising in private schools over the last 25 years. The ISC said many schools were able to reduce their fees, excluding VAT, in January to cushion the impact on parents. But ISC Chief Executive Julie Robinson said the sector had been hit by a triple whammy of national insurance changes, an end to charitable business rates relief and 20% VAT on fees. Full details of the report can be found online. SEND is also in the news from Schools Week as it covers further updates from the Schools and Academies show. This time the report says officials are considering a shake-up of the Education Health and Care Plan system that would likely lead to a narrowing or new structure of support. Speaking to Schools Week, Dame Christine Lenihan added that discussions were ongoing about whether EHCPs should only apply to special school pupils. The number of EHCPs has increased rapidly in recent years, from 294,758 in 2020 to 434,354 in 2024. And schools and other services have struggled to keep up with demand. In March, a Schools Week investigation exposed the poor quality of many plans. The government is drawing up reforms to the wider SEND sector, with speculation the whole system of EHCPs could be scrapped. Dame Christine, the government's strategic advisor on SEND, responded to questions about the EHCP system by saying, "It's not fit for purpose." And when asked if she envisaged there being fewer EHCPs, she said, "I think probably so." She went on to say, "I see the huge amount of money we put on statutory assessment, and then I look at the translation into schools and it is not working." Further comment and reaction can be found on Schools Week online. Finally, BBC Tees reports on the success of a cafe in Hartlepool that has been giving young people who struggle with school a different way of learning vital life skills. The cafe opened in November 2024 and is set up for takeaway orders. There is a chef and a number of students who learn food hygiene, health and safety, customer service and how to cook. Children are referred by their schools and English and maths are also studied. Young people attending the provision say, "I've grown and developed a lot. It's changed me completely." Whilst the cafe's co-director says, "There is a no negativity rule and praise is very important." Full details of the positive impact of this alternative provision can be found on BBC Tees website. This has been Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
Welcome back. Andy
Hi
and
there.
George.
Hi, got you.
Hey, still here.
Fantastic. So let's open this up a bit further. And Andrew, I'm going to direct the question at you because you told me earlier that you've done your NPQSL. What do you think about these leadership programs? Do they go far enough? Do you think there's anything missing from the framework? Do they really prepare middle leaders to become knowledgeable senior leaders?
I think they certainly have a place, and they are exceptionally useful in particular aspects. So, for one, and I'm talking specifically about the transition from middle to senior leadership, which in many ways is actually kind of more intense, if you like, than stepping up to run a department, which you may have been a part of for a number of years. And what they're good at is encouraging the leader to see the whole school perspective, as George was talking about, you know, in terms of managing outputs and looking at how decisions and initiatives which are run across the whole school actually manifest differently in different departments for different purposes. So getting a broader strokes picture of the actual organizational structure and application of initiatives is really useful. Where I think there's still development work to be done is in the soft skills that leaders require. Your emotional intelligence, your ability to evaluate and work with colleagues and support them and understand that no two people are the same. What motivates and drives one may be the polar opposite for somebody else. So that natural empathy, which comes naturally to some people, might require more development in others, is an area where I think there's room to develop in these NPQ programs around the social psychology of actually running teams and then managing leaders as well as they step into senior leadership, managing managers of teams, if you like, and making sure that there's a continuity of approach and vision that flows down and that everyone's reading from the same hymn book.
So when you did your NPQSL, do you think, and you stepped into the leadership role, do you think it prepared you well? And what were your experiences? What did it teach you?
So I was a glutton for punishment, and I did my NPQSL at the same time as I did my my MSc in educational leadership, and so the learning piggybacked off of itself. And if that's something that someone listening to this thinks, you know, I'd like to go and develop my academic knowledge of leadership, if they've got the time. I also had a newborn baby at the same time, so I wouldn't recommend that. But if you have got the time and the capability, then that can be quite a useful way of doing it, because I find the NPQ to be very practical, and it was well served by the more academic and philosophical nature of the MSc. And so those two worked well together, and I found that to be very useful. When I did that, I was in a very, very large school. Actually, George and I were both there in Abu Dhabi, and it really helped me understand the organization as a whole. I actually, for my NPQSL, I implemented a whole school language policy, which hadn't really been in place. And it was a very complex environment because it was a multilingual in terms of our pupil and our staff body. And so it was really useful to think about it from all those perspectives. And I liked the practical applications. And it got me into departments that I really didn't spend much time in when I was, you know, obviously in my English department.
Yes. Yes, I'm currently doing my NPQSL, and I've found it very beneficial. And you mentioned emotional intelligence. So, how important is emotional intelligence and empathy when someone is stepping into leadership? And how can schools help develop that?
I think it's It's actually at the core of what I would do. So one of the key things that I bring to schools and why schools hire me are things like systems and like making efficient ways of doing things. But at the center of all that is people. So you actually lead people. You don't lead the school. You don't lead an organization. You lead people, and you have to do that with empathy. And change is hard for many people, and it can only happen with a relationship where the person who you're leading trusts you, where they trust your management skills, they trust the vision, and you've shown them that you actually understand them. And so you can't really make systemic changes without that. So I would say at the heart of what I do every day, working across a whole school and managing a whole bunch of lines would be empathy is probably my number one thing. If someone has a problem, and rather than look for a solution, the first thing I'll do is listen and then say, well, how can we make this work for you? And then we use the systems in place to help that person. So I would say it's critical, actually.
George, I'm going to direct this question at you because you have done your PhD in building school culture.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you intentionally build a culture where future leaders are grown and nurtured, not just, given extra jobs and called leaders? How do you nurture them?
So when you think of a school, and every school in the world has its vision statements. It has its school motto. It has a whole bunch of things that you see on the website. And if you were to ask many teachers at many schools, well, what's your, what are your school goals? They will, well, maybe mention one or two, but they don't really know what they are. And that's a problem, because if you're a leader of a school, your job is to embed those school vision statements into the everyday practices. So realistically, building culture starts with embedding the journey into everyday practices. If you say, well, hey, we're a school that is inclusive, then systems need to be inclusive, and anything that's not needs to be interrogated. And that can be painful for some schools, because when people make a thing at a school, they get emotionally attached to it and they don't like change. So making school culture starts with the leader themselves embodying the school vision and the school mission and the school goals. And then it fans out from there, and it goes out through things like everyday practices. Like, for example, if one of your goals at a school is to create an equitable and excellent learning environment, then the choices that you make must be geared towards that and must be visibly geared towards that. And so
Absolutely.
you make school culture by embodying it and by living it and putting systems in place that help people actualize that. That's the short answer of a 280-page document. So it really is about getting people on board, and it starts with people. Leadership and management are two things that people think, well, one is not the same as the other one. Great management is a part of great leadership, because that builds trust in where you're going. Vision and embodying that vision and getting people on board with that vision, it comes from this idea that you're competent and you're prepared and you're like empathetic towards the needs and the wants of the people in your school, whether it be the students or support staff or the faculty. And so it's a very involved process. It's never done, but it really starts with getting people on board.
You're absolutely right, and you've explained it beautifully. So let's just, zoom out a little and look at the bigger picture. The systems and the structures that support leadership development. So, Andrew, how do you approach leadership development at Trident College? What does it actually look like on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, we're in an interesting context here. We're an incredibly busy boarding school. And so obviously it is 24/7 full speed ahead, non-stop. And yet we're a relatively small school, certainly compared to some of the big corporate versions in the Middle East that we've perhaps worked in previously. And so we're blessed in a way, because leadership development can happen in a very organic way. I was incredibly blessed when I came here. My headmaster at the time, Mr. Austin Clark, really did take on a kind of mentorship role for me. And it starts with as George touched upon there, you have to know your staff, You have to know their ambitions. You have to know their goals and their aspirations. And then through the process of sitting with them and talking about their goals and aspirations, you can then put systems or opportunities in place systematically in a way that's going to allow them to feel fulfilled, allow them to feel challenged, allow them to spread their wings as they take on their leadership journey. And it can happen in a manner that really is, as I mentioned previously, those hundreds of little conversations, and not being a senior leader sitting in the ivory tower of your office and never getting out from behind your desk. As challenging as that can be when you're incredibly busy, it really is about being visible in the school, having those conversations. We're fortunate in that because we're a boarding school, we have, obviously the boarding side as well. And so there are a great deal of middle leadership positions in one capacity or another that people can get involved in. And so typically they would work through either the kind of academic route in terms of head of department, or the boarding route in the pastoral side, and they can actually develop those skills as they go, along with their relevant line manager offering the mentorship and support.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I do think is incredibly important as well, though, and this ties in again partially to what George was just talking about, is, there's no point, and schools waste an inordinate amount of money on professional development that has no long-term effect because it's not embedded in the group. It's not cascaded out to other staff. There's a fantastic book I could recommend for your listeners called Professional Capital by Andy Hargreaves and Michael Fullan, which is really phenomenal. And they highlight in that schools typically, they send someone off to go and do their whatever piece of PD they're doing, and off they go, and they come back, and the furthest the conversation goes was, well, how was your course? Oh yeah, it was really good, thanks. And then the next year they send someone else off again, and that is an incredibly inefficient way to develop skills. So really creating a culture and finding the time for people who go on professional development in a leadership capacity to come back and cascade it to the others who may be interested, and getting the conversation flowing, I think, is absolutely crucial. And that's one of the best ways. As soon as people feel that there's a group, or that they're supported in their leadership journey, those conversations happen organically. And I find that to be particularly effective in the way that we're trying to promote leadership, especially for our younger staff who are maybe starting out in that leadership journey.
Yeah, that's absolutely great. George, have you seen any systems or models internationally that do well?
I think, look, every school seems to have their own way of doing this thing, but one thing that these systems have in common is that they identify people, and they give them opportunities to take control of their learning. An example would be something that we're working on at the moment here. It's called the Leadership Growth System. It's in a draft form, but it presents either new middle leaders or aspiring middle leaders, or people that want to make that jump into senior leadership. It has a checklist for them, things like, there's a number of items that fall under some key headings: lead change and think strategically, with a bunch of items. Foster productive organizational conditions, navigate relationships, communicate effectively, develop self and others. So we got these kind of 4 areas or 5 areas that we look at, and within those, a leader would set a goal, and it could be something to do with, for example, they want to make a change in a department, and so they want to be more inclusive, and so they would set a goal around that, and then they would work towards that goal, and they would get reflection from their team, and they would be mentored every step of the way. So the common thing, as Andy said, is mentoring. Without mentoring, you will not develop those skills, because you're basically blindly feeling your way through things, and you'll get more misses than you do hits, and you'll be very burnt out. So I'd say that the key thing is mentoring, and the key thing is recognition of that there needs to be a system to develop leaders in that school.
I absolutely agree with the idea of mentoring. It's really important to mentor middle leaders effectively, so that they become, excellent senior leaders. Do you think schools should have formal leadership pipeline, or does this feel too corporate?
Well, here's an interesting thing. When you get onto a plane and you fly off, do you want the pilot to fall up into that role, or do you want the pilot to be trained and competent in that role? When you go to hospital to get something done, do you want that nurse to have fallen into that role because she was kind of hanging around in the ER and she looked good in a set of scrubs, or so when you step back and you say this idea that somehow being corporate is a bad thing, when fundamentally it's not, because I think it's misunderstood. Schools are like anything else, and and the common argument that you might get is, well, schools deal with people. Yes, hospitals deal with people, and they're very systematized. Hotels deal with people. Anything that deals with people has to be systematized, so there's accountability. And so I would prefer, if I was sending my child to a school, that the teachers were well trained and the leaders had a plan as to how they're going to improve the learning of my child over time. So I think you need to step back and say, can we afford not to have that in schools? Would there be anything worse than a bunch of people in schools getting jobs because they fell up into those jobs and were kind of learning as they go with no guidance? So I would say that we need to take that from a corporate field, and we need those kind of systems, and we need to show pathways, whether it be through learning or mentoring or practice or professional development, that fosters growth in people. And we need to drop this idea that management and leadership are different, and drop this idea that corporate culture is bad. There's an element of excellence in all of those things, and schools need to take those and need to train their leaders up so they are excellent and expert leaders. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, a better leader will make a better school, and a better school will create better outcomes.
So when you both are looking for future leaders, what other qualities would you want to see in them?
Interesting question. I would say leadership is actually tough. Like one of the hardest things to do is, for example, if you're a head of department and you move up into a senior leadership role, then your relationship with the people that you used to work alongside fundamentally changes from that day. You can't, you're not in the trenches with them anymore, and you can't be. And so the resilience and ability to change and ability to kind of step away from maybe a friendship. I don't know if that's the right word, but you have to be less friendly and more leadery around them. And you can still maintain personal relationships like we do all over the world, but there has to be a very clear line that you need to draw. And so I would say a resilience and a willingness to lead by example, and an ability to find solutions to problems, even if those have a personal dimension, like someone you work with for 20 years has done something wrong who you're kind of friends with. You need to be able to find a way to navigate that. So I would say someone that's is a resilient problem solver who's willing to step into that role knowing full well that it means they need to be a leader as opposed to like a teacher or in the trenches with other people.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, because resilience was the first one that came to mind for me as well. You're not going to get all your decisions right, and you're going to have days where even though you've taken the right decision, the outcome is not what you expected, and you can't be falling apart under that kind of, when things don't go right. You've got to dust yourself off. But I think one of the most important ones for me is someone who's reflective, because when they don't go right, in the busy world of a modern school, it's so easy to just shoot on to the next thing. We're always teaching our pupils about reflection and the power of learning from past experiences. And so that's a quality that I think is really important. Someone that's humble enough to say, okay, I didn't get that one right, but where did I go wrong? And how can I learn from that in the future? Because ultimately, that's what learning leadership is. And that's why people who've been doing it for 30 years, we look at them and go, wow, you're just a phenomenal leader. Well, it came from trial and error. It came from experience. And so that ability to reflect back on where things have gone wrong and move forward positively in the right direction, I think is absolutely essential.
Absolutely.
I think for me, it's really important that when you step up into leadership, that you have the ability to lead with a humble heart. Um, it's important to have all those skills that you have mentioned, like resilience, to be a great problem solver, to engage in difficult conversations, but also being humble is really important. Would you agree?
I would say absolutely. I would say I'd adopt a white belt mentality that I'm the least skilled in the room, and what that helps me do is to, with empathy, kind of understand if someone has a problem, or perhaps if there's a conflict, interpersonal conflict or something, or there's something happening outside of school that people need support, and you can see how potentially there's a collision course happening with what the school needs and with what the person needs. I think if you're reflective and empathetic and you take that human approach, that you don't know everything and you work with people to find solutions and you leave your ego at the door, you'll be a very effective leader.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
what are the myths about leadership that you would like to put to rest?
Oh man, management and leadership are different things. Schools are about people, therefore we should lead with emotion. I would say that learning on the job without support, or these kind of things that have been thrown around, are things that need to be pushed away because they're fundamentally wrong. I want my leaders to be also good and smart managers who find better ways to do things for me, who save money for the school in one area so we can spend it in other areas, who make
Yeah.
better systems to support students who need better help, who, that could be anything from finding ways to provide meals to finding ways to provide opportunities for sport or leadership or anything. So I need a great manager and I need a visionary. So I need both of those things. I think the myth that schools need to be driven by emotion is a problem. And I think that this idea that management and leadership are different is a problem. So let's forget those things.
Yeah, I
What do
would
you think,
say,
Andy?
yeah, I was thinking about this one. It's an interesting one. For me, the myth that leadership is about making big decisions and titles and all the rest of it. The reality is leadership is nothing to do with titles. Um,
Mhm.
and it's in the hundreds of small decisions you make each day and how you actually go out and help other people to make better decisions. That's true leadership. Yes, sometimes you're called upon to make a big decision and everyone likes to have the power to be able to do that, but that's not the crux of what a leadership job really is. It's about making as many small decisions accurately and effectively as you can, and putting in the hard work. You've got to really want to lead teams of people. Teaching is hard. We did not choose an easy profession where it's not always the best paid. So if you're in this, you want to be a leader in education, it has to come from the heart, it has to come from passion, and it has
Mm.
to come from a desire. As I've always said, my goal has always been, personally for me, is to teach as many pupils as I can, as well as I can, as much of the time as I can. And moving into leadership, I saw as an extension of that, so that if I can help other teachers be better and be more effective, then I'm reaching more students, which was my initial goal in the first place. So you don't need a title to lead. Anyone can take on leadership roles, and it's not about the title and the credit and the kudos. It's about doing it from the heart.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Remember, the leader's role is to make learning better for students in the school, whatever that looks like. And if a leader's making a choice that's not focused on that, then that needs to be interrogated, because it's problematic leadership if what you're doing is making learning actively worse, or not improving it in a way that it should be.
Yeah.
How do you both ensure that leadership development is equitable so that you're not just promoting the most visible people?
Hmm. So I tend to ignore the most visible people, because I tend to be very suspicious of people's motivations. So I tend to look behind the scenes a bit, and I think it's a pretty unpopular view to say that leadership is a skill, but it also requires a type of personality. And that personality is something that you develop over time. For example, if you're a very social person, you need to develop an aspect of your leadership that maybe is a bit less social in a professional situation. So I tend to get to know people on a personal basis. I work in a very big school, but I take the time to see them and say, how was your weekend? What were you doing? I understand their personal situation, and so I kind of look beyond the idea that someone's always there taking credit. I look, well, who really did this? Who's on the team? What did these people do? So I tend to be more of an observer than a picking the person that puts a hand up the most. In terms of like equitability, there are people who with, for example, if you're say a single mother with a long commute, or a single father, and you've got like a role outside of school that might mean that you can't be as visible at certain times in the school, then you need to provide opportunities for people with say responsibilities outside school, so they can show themselves, so that they can basically demonstrate that they have the skills and the motivation. And so I think it's really about like a big part of being a good leader is to know your staff, and I think that just goes along with it.
Yeah, absolutely. It starts with relationships, and the reality that if you know your staff and you know your team, you're finding opportunities for them to demonstrate certain skill sets in certain areas that may fit them brilliantly, that might not fit someone else, but you're providing another opportunity for that someone else who has a slightly different skill set to perhaps function effectively in the pastoral side of things. So it's not that, that leadership is not one size fits all, and so it's about finding, and I know we're going to talk about this possibly shortly, but finding the roles within the school for the skill sets of the individuals that you're working with. The interesting challenge, and I think it's really important, is role designations and job descriptions can be changed. Finding great people is way harder.
Absolutely.
So it comes back to what I said about, do the job you want to have. The reality is, if you see and I would say this for any aspiring leader, if you see a gap in the school and something's missing, then get out there and fill it. Make a plan, get involved, go over and above what you might normally be expected to do, and make that area or that section of the school your own in terms of your capabilities and your skill set. And then that you don't have to be a loud and brash person to do that. You will be noticed, because now senior leaders love solutions. We love it when staff come with solutions and not just problems. And so if you are aspiring to be a leader, then start living that now. And all schools have gaps. We all have areas that we'd like to improve. And if you can get yourself into somewhere that's really beneficial, you will be noticed regardless of your personality type. And just on the equitability thing, the reality is the education of our children is far too important for things like nepotism and nonsense to have people falling up. The reality is, the best person, I don't care where you're from, who you are, as if you are the best person for the role, then you need to be in that job, because if that then if you're not, it negatively impacts the children, and then we're wasting our time.
I agree. As one of my outdoor guide teachers taught me years ago, you can train a monkey to hold a rope. So if someone is the right person with the right motivation, commitment, I can train them. Actually, I'd prefer that. I would actually prefer to mentor them into that role rather than have them come. So it really is very difficult to find the right person, and I've often changed roles to suit the person, because I know I'll get the best out of that person.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree. It's all about dedication and commitment. And if you have that passion and the drive and the dedication, and if you give it your all, I think you're on the road to become a good senior leader. It's time for another quick break. You're listening to the TTR Late Show with me. Stay tuned and we shall be back.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads. No distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. eduflix.com.
Hi secondary school teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculums. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
Did you know that every year, half of disadvantaged children who are top attainers at primary school don't go on to achieve top GCSE maths results? At Axiom Maths, we exist to change that. Our fully funded programme helps schools nurture young mathematicians through weekly face-to-face maths circles, where pupils tackle challenging and exciting problems outside the national curriculum. With just under £3,000 annual funding, expert training and quality resources, we give schools everything they need to inspire the next generation of mathematical thinkers. Want to make a difference? Visit axiommaths.com today and join over 400 schools delivering maths circles across the UK.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
So-called stuck schools will be held accountable even if support brokered for them by the government RISE teams fails to turn them around, according to a report in Schools Week. Speaking at the Schools and Academies Show, Department for Education Director General John Edwards said, "The current responsible body, the Schools Trust or Council, is accountable for the improvement. It owns the improvement journey." He went on to say that this starting principle had been really important for Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson. Earlier this month, 45 new advisors were appointed to join the 20 already appointed in RISE teams. The expanded team will start working with more than 200 schools deemed stuck for receiving a requires improvement Ofsted grade following an earlier below good judgment. When the government initially unveiled plans for the RISE teams, there was confusion around accountability. But slides shown during the presentation by Mr. Edwards indicate that once a school becomes eligible for support, the RISE teams will assess its capacity to improve. Where a school needs help, it will be matched with a high-quality organisation and considered for funded intervention. An improvement plan would then be co-constructed. Edwards went on to say the RISE advisor's job is not to deliver the improvement. The BBC Education section of their news website reports that private school fees were 22.6% higher on average in January this year when compared with a year earlier. This is according to the body that represents most independent schools in the UK, the Independent Schools Council. It says it expects a reduction in pupils applying to private schools as a result of changes to VAT. But it says it is too soon to know the full effects of the policy. The average termly fee for a day school in January was £7,382, which includes 20% VAT. In January 2024, the average was £6,021. A Treasury spokesperson says the increase in fees are not only down to VAT, and that fees have been rising in private schools over the last 25 years. The ISC said many schools were able to reduce their fees, excluding VAT, in January to cushion the impact on parents. But ISC Chief Executive Julie Robinson said the sector had been hit by a triple whammy of national insurance changes, an end to charitable business rates relief, and 20% VAT on fees. Full details of the report can be found online. SEND is also in the news from Schools Week as it covers further updates from the Schools and Academies show. This time the report says officials are considering a shake-up of the Education Health and Care Plan system that would likely lead to a narrowing or new structure of support. Speaking to Schools Week, Dame Christine Lenihan added that discussions were ongoing about whether EHCPs should only apply to special school pupils. The number of EHCPs has increased rapidly in recent years, from 294,758 in 2020 to 434,354 in 2024, and schools and other services have struggled to keep up with demand. In March, a Schools Week investigation exposed the poor quality of many plans. The government is drawing up reforms to the wider SEND sector, with speculation the whole system of EHCPs could be scrapped. Dame Christine, the government's strategic advisor on SEND, responded to questions about the EHCP system by saying it's not fit for purpose. And when asked if she envisaged there being fewer EHCPs, she said, "I think probably so." She went on to say, "I see the huge amount of money we put on statutory assessment, and then I look at the translation into schools and it is not working." Further comment and reaction can be found on Schools Week online. Finally, BBC Tees reports on the success of a cafe in Hartlepool that has been giving young people who struggle with school a different way of learning vital life skills. The cafe opened in November 2024 and is set up for takeaway orders. There is a chef and a number of students who learn food hygiene, health and safety, customer service and how to cook. Children are referred by their schools and English and maths are also studied. Young people attending the provision say, "I've grown and developed a lot. It's changed me completely." Whilst the cafe's co-director says, "There is a no negativity rule and praise is very important." Full details of the positive impact of this alternative provision can be found on BBC Tees website. This has been Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
Amazing.
Hello there, welcome back.
Hi.
I'm still here. Hey.
Hello. Okay,
Right.
Andy, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Perfect, I can hear you.
Great.
So in this segment, I would like to focus on the future-focused leadership. So my question is directed to both of you. If you could design the perfect leadership development pathway from scratch, what would be absolutely essential to include?
Excellent. Well, I think we need a system for goal setting and reviewing. So you need a process for middle leaders to set goals, senior leaders to set goals, make pathways to achieve those goals and create a bunch of metrics to measure the success of those goals. You need a feedback mechanism and process. If your goal is about improving teaching and learning, then you need a mechanism that includes the stakeholders in there, perhaps the students and the parents, and then there'd be a reflection on that goal. And then that would be a consistent process. That might take a year each time. So if you've been at the school for a bunch of years, you would have developed a whole number of skills that were contextual to that school that made you a better leader in that school. I think there would be a mandatory need for you to do further study. look, can you learn stuff through experience? Yes, mostly through failures. So I think if you understand, strategic goals and you understand leadership theory, and I think there needs to be some practical management in there too. Senior leaders, the job isn't to be a teacher; it's to manage a school. It's to lead a school. So you need things like budgets, contracts. You need all that boring stuff that will help you manage all of those things effectively.
How would this work for senior leaders who are still teaching? For instance, you might have a teaching deputy head. So how would this work for them?
So that was my role when I worked with Andy in Zambia. That was my role, and Andy's a senior lead now, and he still teaches. So it works exactly the same, where you have multiple goals across a bunch of areas. I had as a senior leader that taught, and even now I teach as well. You have teaching goals that would be perhaps assessed by your head of department if you're not the HOD, and you have leadership goals that would be managed and mentored by your line manager in a senior leadership role. So it works the same ways. It's just multidimensional.
Yeah, and I think it's really valuable as a senior leader if you're still in the classroom, at least in some context, because one, it's a pretty decent way of gaining understanding from staff who realize that you are still at the chalk face, at least to some extent, and you've not just entered the ivory tower, as I said previously. But it also it just helps you keep your ear to the ground on the happenings within your school. So I think it's really valuable, and that's exactly how we do it. We have different goals across our different departments. It's interesting because I suppose technically in the English. Then sorry, can you still hear me? My phone's.
Yep, we got you.
So, for example, in the English department, my HOD might potentially be my line manager for the English teaching aspect, and yet I'm his senior in every other area. So it takes a little bit of careful thought, but it can be managed in a way that people have different roles and responsibilities in different facets of the school. It's, in response to your question, Huma, I think one of the things that I would do that any good leadership development program requires, and I think it's absolutely true what George said, that the academic learning is invaluable. And it goes back to what we said before about accepting you're not the most intelligent person in the room. There's a whole canon of literature out there written by very intelligent people that you can go and learn. And knowledge is going to give you that confidence and that ability and that broad strokes understanding to be able to be more effective as a leader. Where schools could be better is how they integrate the learning that those staff members who are undergoing formal academic training are experiencing, how they integrate that within their school structures. I think that's something that needs looked at and could be done very effectively.
Thank you for that, Andy. My next question is, how would we start shifting school culture so leadership is the right step, not just, the next step?
I think the easiest way to start with that is to devolve the process to the senior school leadership roles in people in that school. For example, the head of a school is the best person, or his leadership team are the best placed actually to build a system or a structure that's contextual. It has to be contextual because every school context is subtly different. Could be anything from geographics to socioeconomics to the makeup of the staff to like everything. So the first step really is to devolve that at a local level because you get the best outcomes that fit what the school needs. And so really you have to trust your heads of school. If you're a government, you have to trust your heads of school to actually carry a bigger burden for that. I'm not sure what the process is like in the UK, but what you need is a system where the people on the ground make the choices.
And what advice would you both give to middle leaders who want to take the next step?
I'd say firstly, be careful what you wish for. And secondly, do all the things that we spoke about earlier. Learn about it, like study it, look at things, be involved in different aspects of the school where you deal with things like conflict resolution, where you deal with things like like special needs learning, or like anything, be involved, or if you're not involved, have conversations with people.
George,
Yeah.
is there a project? Sorry, Andy, you were saying?
No, no. I was just going to say, absolutely. It goes back to carve out the role for yourself that you want to do. There's so much learning you can do before you step anywhere close to a formal title or a formal role. So if if you are currently a middle leader and you're thinking of stepping up to being a senior leader, you need to start thinking of yourself in that context. Start thinking about how you might be marketing your department to external entities, to the community. How are you promoting your subject within your school? Because that becomes part of your role as a senior leader, is really promoting the school and bringing in the pupils and the families that are going to help grow your school. So start thinking with that head on your shoulders in the immediate context you're in your middle leadership role, and it will make the transition easier when you then step up to senior leadership.
In your experience, in your leadership role, Andy, how have you promoted your subject?
In terms of what I do now, so my current role now is Director of Sixth Form Universities and Careers, and to be honest, when I arrived in this role, I found pretty much a blank slate. There really wasn't anything in place, certainly not the way I envisaged it and kind of saw it working. So we've done a number of things. We've started, in fact, I'm going away at the end of the month to go and speak to a lot of our parents down in Lusaka, in the capital city, and in a couple of other places around Zambia, to talk about universities and careers, and to touch base and be more visible, if you like, on that aspect of the sixth form program, so that we're showing the added value of doing A levels and of staying the course through to the end of year 13 and then going direct to university rather than a foundation course, which is so popular in the international sphere. So being a lot more visible than my predecessor might have been with parents, and engaging and systematizing things, producing resources that are, branded for the school and identifiable as ours, and making them available, has certainly seen a jump in our applications. Because I think people are starting to understand all the added value beyond simply the academic qualifications their children will get when they come to the sixth form program. On top of that, I think elevating the role and status of the sixth form program within the wider school, with all our staff and our pupils as well, making it much more visible as the kind of flagship of what we do here at Trident College. So a lot of it was just putting visible markers in place that say, this is who we are, this is what we do, come and join us.
Andy, I think you might have to mute your speakers in the background.
My speakers aren't on.
No worries.
George, I'm going to come to you. Is there a project you're currently working on that supports leadership development at Roberts College in Turkey?
Yeah, so when I came here, I joined the leadership. So we have the teacher growth system like every school has. And a year ago, just over a year ago, before I came here, they made a committee. There's 4 people on it in the school. The 3 of them are in larger leadership roles, and so we made this system that we're trialing at the moment to help leaders develop their skills. And that's I mentioned earlier, across a whole bunch of areas, from things like school culture to systems to conflict resolution. And so the project is called Leadership Growth System. I'm hoping to present on it at a conference at some point. It's in its draft phases, but it's implemented this year in a trial, and will be implemented at the start of next year in all of its glory.
When and where will you be presenting?
That is a great question. I'm looking for a conference, but I would hope to do it at the end of this year somewhere, once we've got some data on how effective it is.
Okay, that sounds really exciting.
It is. It's actually excellent. Hopefully, it's a blueprint to show schools that they can develop leaders in a structured way that supports the school goals and ultimately supports teaching and learning.
Okay, make sure you keep me informed about that project. It sounds really interesting.
Absolutely.
Okay, so a question for you both. You both are senior leaders. You've been in the senior leadership role for a very long time. What kind of feedback helped shape you as, an effective leader?
I would say the feedback something that I keep in kind of close to my is that I can't get everything right all of the time,
Yeah.
and so what that does, it makes me approach leadership in a humble way, never take anything for granted, and and it means I approach it in a reflective way. Hey, did I get the best outcome? Was this the best thing? Is there a bridge I need to mend? But was I too strong there? Was I not strong enough? So I think understanding that you will make a lot of mistakes, actually, and it's what you do next after you make that mistake that's possibly more important than getting that thing right the first time.
For me, it was that you can't do it all yourself. My personality type, and when I stepped into leadership, was I thought all those years ago, I thought, well, if I just do everything and then share everything, then all my colleagues will love me and I'll be a great leader. And the reality is, when you get into senior leadership in particular, you humanly can't do it all yourself, and it's not your job to do it, because you're actually, if you do try and do it all yourself, you're actually removing opportunities for growth and development of leadership in others. And so learning to delegate was hard. We call it delegation, relinquish control, I suppose. And that's part of the journey. And so I definitely think for me that was a big learning curve. And it certainly, once you do learn to relinquish control and you see other people doing an amazing job, then it's incredibly rewarding and fulfilling. So yeah.
Can I be honest though, mate? You do such good work. I was very happy when you did all that stuff.
I'm sure you were. My wife wasn't.
Okay, so my final question to you both. What do you wish you'd known before taking on your first leadership role?
You don't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
That's it.
Andy?
You better really want this.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, like we said before, it's got to come from a place of passion,
Yeah.
because there are going to be long nights. There's going to be times where you miss out on things with your family. There's going to be sacrifice. So you better be sure you really want it, because it's going to be a lot of hard work. But I can honestly say, and I'm sure George would back me on this, that it's the most rewarding thing I've done in my professional career was stepping into leadership and leading other teachers.
Absolutely, and seeing schools improve, and seeing the outcomes for students improve, and seeing the opportunities improve, and seeing teachers develop 100%.
Well, Andrew and George, I'd like to thank you both so much. This has been such a rich and a reflective conversation, and I really appreciate your honesty and insight. So thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed the show too.
Oh, it's great. Thank you so much for having us, or having me back, and really appreciate it. And thanks to anyone that listens. Reach out to me if you need any, if you need some advice on LinkedIn. Not hard to find.
Absolutely.
Yep. Absolutely. This was the first radio show I've done, but it was fantastic. And thank you very much for having me on. Same thing applies. I'm sure you'll share my LinkedIn and stuff like that. If anyone wants to just chat or seek any advice or guidance, I'm more than happy to do so.
Okay. And for everyone listening, thank you for tuning in to the TTR Late Show. If you missed a part of the show, you can catch the replay on Podbean. And don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter for updates on future shows. Until next time, keep growing, keep leading, and remember, let's build leaders, not just fill roles. Take care. Absolutely. And good night.
Good night.
Good night. Good night, Andy.
Good night. Thank you very much.
Good night. You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.